Hey guys. So, as I'm recording this episode, I just went through midterms. That was a whole process, and I really feel like the honeymoon phase of my first semester of grad school is over. So, I want to take some time to check in and just kind of chat about how I'm managing my caseload, general impressions, and how I'm managing life as a grad student. And we'll talk a little bit about my own mental health here at the end. So I hope y'all enjoy, and I hope this gives you some insight into what grad school may look like for you. Welcome, friends, and thank you for joining Woah to Woah. I am so happy you are here and ready to jump into the world of mental health with me. In case you are new once again, I am your host, Savannah. I am currently in my master's in mental health counseling, and I am taking you along for the ride with me as I begin to understand anything and everything mental health. So I want to start off with just kind of like the general impact of this semester so far. Of course, I had some life things happen and some transitional stuff happen at work that did impact just how hard this semester was. And I don't know, I feel like great way to start because life is not easy. Things are going to come up when you least want them to. Things don't work out perfectly. And this semester was a great example of that. So I had this really beautiful routine set. I spent 3 months. So I found out I got into my grad program in October. I spent pretty much 3 months planning. I was watching YouTube videos. I was listening to podcasts. I was like, had all these huge plans for like my routine and how things were going to work out because I'm a planner. I'm very much like, I wish I wasn't type A, but I'm type A. So I had all these plans for how this semester was going to work out. And of course, that's not how it worked out. And that's just life. So we have to adjust and be flexible and figure out where to go from there. I do want to start off with some good news. So, how I did on my midterms. I just want to kind of talk about this first because even with the hard things that happened, I feel like the way I handled it really is reflected in the grades I got on my midterms and things like that. So, drum roll, please. I got a 98 on my midterm in my research and counseling class. I got a 94 on my midterm in theories, and then I got 100 in my midterm in human development. So overall, I'm feeling really confident. I did hit some road bumps that we'll chat about later, but overall, I did pretty good, and that's why I feel very confident about like chatting about my methods for managing this stuff because I really hope that this is something other people can take with them and kind of utilize if they're feeling like things just aren't working out the way you want them to. And how do you pivot when that happens? When things started getting crazy, I really had to take a step back and think about a few things and adjust a few things. First, I really want to chat about the general impacts of this semester and how I handled them. This semester did hit me kind of hard because I had some personal stuff going on and I had some adjustment stuff going in at work. And as much as I love to plan and I love to have all these routines planned out and these things planned out, life does not work that way always. So before I started my program, I got it accepted in October and I spent like 3 to 4 months just watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, trying to figure out every method to make my routine right and make this right and do this and this just to make everything work perfectly. And of course, like life does not work that way always. I really had to adjust as things went on and as life changed to what needed to be done, not necessarily how exactly I wanted it to be done. So that was just a general takeaway to talk a little bit more about how I got through some of those difficulties when life was hitting me and I'm starting this huge new project, which is grad school. As things are coming at me, I just want to talk about a few specific things that I came back to kind of help through this. So the first thing was just remembering why I'm here. Remembering why you were in your program, why you're doing this in the first place is such a key thing to come back to because having that intrinsic motivation is so important to why we do things. If we're just doing this for money or we're just doing this to have a lifestyle of a therapist, it's not necessarily going to be a big motivating factor. But if you come back to your big why, like I talked about my why earlier in the season, then it's a lot easier every day to say, this is such a small part of what I'm doing. and I have to do this well so I can get to that next step. And that's something I really had to come back to. So whether you post that like on your desk, or you make it your screensaver on your phone, or you put it on your mirror in your bathroom. Personally, I use Notion for everything. So it's on my Notion homepage. Just having that why in the back of your mind that you can come back to as a touchstone and remember, hey, there's a reason we're here. Even though it's hard, there's something bigger coming to you. I think that's so important to just have in the background as we go through these things and as I go through my grad program. So that's definitely a big tool I used and I came back to as things got hard. The second thing I really thought about was how I talk to myself. So early on in my therapy journey, something I had to work on a lot to change was my self-talk, how I talk to myself. Because the automatic for me for a long time was negative self-talk. Like I just parroted things I had heard people say, and it's really easy to internalize the negative things in your life a lot more than the positive things in your life. So I would constantly be like, I hate this, or just, I can't do this, or this is too hard, or I'm not good enough for this. And so I got really good at changing that and adjusting that and saying, hey girl, no, you're doing great. You're doing your best. Like things aren't going to be perfect, but you're doing your best. And that was a skill I had really built up pre my grad program. However, of course, I'm making this transition. I'm starting a grad program. Things are happening outside of my grad program that are also affecting my mental health. So I really had to start building that skill back when things were harder. And it's okay to backslide a little. You just got to remember you have to come back to it and you have to work on it. And positive self-talk was definitely something that got me through this period of adjustment, because you're going to have bad days. And on those bad days, you don't want that voice in your head that's telling you you can't do this to be the one that wins. And this is work, like you're going to have that voice. She's going to be loud. She's going to be really loud. And you have to say, hey, girl, that's not me. That's not us. We're doing great. We're doing our best. And just having that internal dialogue can really change your mindset and change how you move through things. So starting your day with, I can do this. It sounds silly, but starting your day with affirmations is really just so key to changing your mindset. I would say, I can do this. Even if I don't like it right now, like I got to get through this and I'm going to do it as well as I can. If I can't do something the way exactly I want to, at least I'm doing it. At least I'm making things happen, and that's enough. Because things aren't going to always be perfect. Being caring for yourself, talking to yourself in a positive way, as small as it sounds, it can really change how you work through things. And so that was definitely something that I came back to a lot this semester to kind of try and cope with all the stress and the things that were going on in my life outside of school and in school. And remember, this skill doesn't happen all at once. It's a daily thing, a daily work in progress of you stopping that voice in your head and saying, we're doing our best. We're making it happen. And we're going to keep going even if it's hard. I'm not going to be able to get every little thing done in the exact way I wanted to. I'm not going to be able to get every task done in the way that that YouTuber does in her life, where it looks like she seems to have it all together. Like I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z exactly like that. And that's okay. Sometimes you're just getting through your readings for the week. Sometimes things aren't all going to get done and you have to cut your losses and move on. It's really about making adjustments where you can and being forgiving with yourself so that you can move forward. And that was a big lesson I learned. And I think that really comes back to the next topic, which is how I manage my readings and my caseload along with my life. So we'll kind of start getting into that. The reason I feel like this is a good transition is because the way I had to learn how to manage my workload and school was just by being flexible, having some flexibility with yourself, having some flexibility in all the things you do is so important. Like I said, I went into the semester so overprepared, insanely overprepared, and that's just who I am. I love to research. I love to find all the little tips and tricks, and that's great. I don't regret doing that. the way I tried to change my mindset at how I looked at all those things is it's not going to exactly happen like that, but I have a toolbox I come back to and I pull from. And it's okay that I'm not taking notes in exactly the same way for all my classes. I'm not taking notes in exactly the same way for all my readings. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of what I personally have in my school toolbox, my grad school toolbox for you guys. So the standard I did want to set for myself when I first started, which it seems crazy unrealistic now. What I wanted to do was do all my notes handwritten in GoodNotes and keep a database of vocab I learn and do a summarization of all of my class notes in Notion and have this second brain in Notion. And as cool as that sounds, as cool as it would be to have that, it's just not realistic. Most people in grad school, you're working. You have a life. You maybe have kids. I think simplifying a little bit and allowing yourself flexibility is what's going to help you get through this rather than shooting for this perfect, beautiful thing that you have in your mind. So I have a few tools I use flexibly as I move throughout my semester. The first one is going to be I use GoodNotes for my note taking on my iPad, but the tool I'm going to kind of talk about is sketchnoting. You can really use this in a notebook, in basically anywhere. What sketchnoting is just basically a form of note taking that kind of brings in some artistic and creative elements. So that way you can better review notes, you memorize usually a little bit better, and you take in content a little better. So I got this little guide randomly at a art market at the Blue Star Complex, which if you're a San Antonioan, you may know the Blue Star Complex. But I got this really awesome sketchnoting guide from a artist there. And she did her thesis in her art program on sketchnoting and had engineer students basically try this sketchnoting process, and it helped them improve their grades. And that's what her whole thesis was about. So I got this little sketchnoting guide from her. I really wish she still had it on her Etsy, but she doesn't. But either way, I'm still going to put her Etsy in my description because I honestly have used this so much and I so appreciate it. Sketchnoting has a few big aspects, like using different typography, using different language, using containers, so in different little boxes or triangles, just creating some visual interest in your notes. You can use different shapes, or you can sketch little visual libraries, so little symbols that mean certain things to you. I use less of the symbols and I more use sketchnoting to move through my content in a creative way that I'm learning and to make it make sense when I go back to look at it, kind of like creating a flow chart of what I am learning or what I am reading. And so that's kind of how I've used sketchnoting. And the reason I like sketchnoting is because sometimes it's a motivator for me to get stuff done. Honestly, if I can sit down and be a little creative in my notes and have more fun with it, aside from it just being good for how you process information, for me, it just gives me some flexibility and some creativity in a task where I may not be feeling super excited. So that's how I use sketchnoting. I don't always use it though. Like I said, I'm really flexible with myself. I don't take notes on every single reading in the exact same way. I don't take notes in every single class in the exact same way, because honestly, each of my classes are so different and the content is so different. So I do kind of have different ways that I use this. So sketchnoting I utilize a lot in my theories lectures because it really helps me pay attention in that class since it's online and it is like a 3-hour lecture. And then also it's really helpful because I have these kind of easy to digest one-sheeters to come back to when I need to look back on a theory and study for my exam or just refresh on what something is as we're learning new topics. So that's one big way I use sketchnoting. Granted, I'll allow myself to use it in different ways. If I want to use it for a reading that's kind of more complex and I need a few more elements to work with, then I'll use it for that. That's where that flexibility aspect comes in. And so sketchnoting is just one of many little tools I have in my toolbox. The second tool I'm going to talk about is going to be flashcards. So whether you do physical flashcards or you do a flashcard set in GoodNotes, or you use Quizlet as a flashcard set, I really like flashcards for my classes that are super dense in information. Theories, while it's a lot of information, it has more, it sounds weird. I want to say it has a vibe, but it just has more ambiguity in it rather than me sitting there and learning terms so that I know them. So my human development class specifically, there is so much information. There is an insane amount of information in that class, an insane amount of terminology. And honestly, I was so overwhelmed trying to just sit down and take notes on the readings in that class because those readings are crazy. They're so huge and it's just so much information. In that class, I kind of flip from what I do in theories. I use flashcards in GoodNotes to create study sets for myself for each chapter as I read. And this makes it easy because the chapters are so dense and so long that if I'm just typing out flashcards really quickly, it makes it go by so much faster. And honestly, the amount of reading I have to do, there's sometimes where I just need to get through it and be able to come back and just study the flashcard set because there was so many terms in that and so much information. So that's kind of how I study for my human development class. And the thing I really like about that for human development is that whenever I have an exam, I can just come back to those study sets and use them. The way I use my study sets is not necessarily just for terms, it's also for concepts. So if I'm going through a chapter, I take like the heading for a section if it's more of just a concept, and then I summarize that section in the answer side of the flashcard. That's kind of how I use it for that class to work for me, because that's what I think has worked the best for studying for me, is finding ways to make things work better for me. And this is not necessarily how I started in this class either. I took the midterm, or not the midterm, I took my first exam and I realized the way I'm studying and the way I'm moving through the readings is just not helpful. I was getting behind on the readings, trying to take all these beautiful notes. I was not memorizing the content fully or not memorizing the terms fully. And so I realized, hey, I really need to take a step back and focus in this class a lot more on memorizing the content and memorizing the terms rather than understanding these big concepts like my theories class. Another tool I use for note-taking / reading is just having a physical textbook. I honestly like to have a mix of physical and electronic textbooks so I can utilize a couple of skills, which we'll get back to here in just a second. But with my physical textbooks, it's really easy to move through the reading and just annotate as I go, highlight as I go. This isn't something that would necessarily work for my human development class where I have a crazy amount of terminology, but for my theories class where I'm trying to understand the concept more than I am the terms, that's perfect. And because the reading is so much, it's so much faster for me to go through, just annotate as I go, than sit there and try to take these crazy notes. I will say I utilize sketchnoting in my readings more so for my research class because of the type of content that is gone over in my research class. So I'm talking about different types of research designs, and I feel like that uses more of the scientific method. And so sketchnoting works for me to kind of show how these pieces are connected to get this research design. Really, the only class I utilize like handwritten notes in is my research class for readings because it just makes sense for that class. And again, that's not how I started the semester. I figured that out as I went. And I think having that flexibility and being forgiving with yourself that, hey, maybe this isn't going to work in this class. Let's make an adjustment and figure out what is going to work in that class is so important. So for research, I really just I do the sketchnoting. For theories, when I'm doing readings, a lot of the times I'm taking notes directly in the textbook. And then human development, I'm doing those flashcards because that is so much terminology. I cannot stress enough, guys. So much terminology. So that's really how I handle readings in those classes. But then again, there's times where, oh my gosh, I have to read 6 chapters this week. How am I going to do that? So another thing I do utilize, especially for maybe supplementary articles that are given to us, or even if I have the textbook, the digital version, like I mentioned earlier, I do use like read aloud feature. So I love the read aloud feature because you can do it on like your laptop. A lot of laptops have a way to do it. You just got to do some Googling, you can figure it out. Or if you have the textbook electronically, it does give you the ability to just usually read aloud from there. The reason I like the read aloud is because I can use it in one of two ways. The first is if I'm really just struggling to focus. The read aloud does help me because I'm hearing it, I'm seeing it, I'm taking it in, and that's just helpful. The other way I use read aloud is just kind of to help manage my time. So I can listen to the audio from the text while I'm cleaning or while I'm doing things around the house that I need to get done, because I have a life, obviously, and I have a home to manage. So using read aloud for that is really helpful. And honestly, it can be the end of the week and I'm like, I don't want to do these last two readings. And honestly, if I didn't do read aloud, there's a chance I just would not get through them. Read aloud is better than me just not reading them. When I would hypothetically love to sit down and take extensive notes on them, sometimes that's just not realistic to what is going on in my life or what my course load looks like. And then just to remind everyone, I am taking a full course load. I'm taking 3 classes. So this is a bit more work than maybe someone who's going part-time. I think that flexibility is even more important when you have a full workload. So that way you can really thrive under those conditions rather than struggle. Just to summarize, we went over a few of the tools I use, which is sketchnoting. We went over study sets or flashcards. We went over my audiobook. We went over just annotating directly in the book. And those are a lot of the different ways I try to make things work for me as I go through my readings and as I go through all of this content. Usually during class, I try to focus more on understanding the concept because most of my professors, actually, scratch that, all of my professors share their slides with us. So in like my human development class and in my research class, I do kind of just annotate on their slides. And so that's how I do notes for those classes. And of course, like that's not how I exactly started out in the semester, but I think making those adjustments as you go so you can say, hey, this is how I'm learning the content better rather than this is how I want to do these notes is so important. Having that flexibility has been key to me all semester, so that way I can do what I need to do in that moment rather than trying to strive for this perfect ideal self or ideal student I had in my mind when I started the semester. And don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to change things up. You can always change it back. You can always adjust. You're in for the long haul. Like this is like a 3-year program for me. You can experiment. You can be flexible. And I think that's kind of like a part of therapy too, as obviously I'm in a clinical mental health program. That's a big part of therapy is just being flexible and doing experiments and making adjustments for yourself so that way you can thrive. And also just getting rid of those self-defeating beliefs that leave you feeling less than. I'm going to do an episode later in the season on overcoming self-defeating beliefs. And that the reason I'm doing that episode is because I fall into that, even as someone who's been through therapy, like having this ideal or having this way you want something to work out and then forcing it instead of making the adjustments you need to. Okay, guys, let's get into the nitty gritty. So let's chat a little bit about like mental health as a graduate student and asking for help. This semester, as I've said, has been a lot. I had personal stuff going on. I had work stuff going on. And then I had also taken like a 1.5 years off school prior to this to really focus on my mental health. So before starting this, I was in a pretty good place. And this has definitely been a test on my mental health. Not to mention all the things going on in the world right now have definitely added another layer that I'm sure most of us are feeling. I did preemptively start back to biweekly sessions with my therapist just to kind of have that going on in the background. And we have a really great working relationship. And she's really great at reminding me of the things I've already overcome and I've already done and just bringing me back into reality when I start to get into those negative headspaces. That's one really big tool I used was just starting back in therapy. And before that, we had been on pause. Like I was doing pretty good. So we were on pause and therapy is up and down. Mental health is up and down. It's okay to ask for help when you need it. It's okay to start back because you're going through a big life transition. And so if you haven't started therapy before, I do highly recommend you are in therapy as you're going through this grad program. Because one, you're going to be a therapist. Why don't you want to go to therapy? Two, you're talking about some topics that are really heavy. You're hearing specific experiences from your professors of their work experience. You're hearing experiences from other students in your program. Like, you are not going to be in control of what you are hearing and what you are taking in. And you want to be prepared for hearing things that may be triggering or may be upsetting, because that's just the work we're going into. So I think therapy is a really good tool. So that way you have someone to come to and say, hey, I didn't know this was going to affect me like this, but it is. Can we talk about that? And so that's another way I've kind of used therapy, is just recognizing maybe some of my biases, recognizing what things are triggering me or amping up my anxiety. So that way when I'm in the therapy room, that's not going to happen, and I can be that support for someone else. So coming back to that asking for help. Honestly, right after midterms, I had an assignment that was due in a class and I failed it. It was like a 3-point assignment, so I'm really not that worried about it. That sounds crazy to like say I failed it, but I did fail it. I got a poor grade, and honestly, I just did really poorly on it because I was not showing up in my work. I was just going through the motions, especially with that assignment. And so I know not only I was struggling in that class, but a lot of my cohort was struggling in that class, because it was just, we were getting really into some nitty gritty topic, and it was in my research class, and it was really difficult to understand, if I'm being completely honest. So my professor did kind of take a step back with us in class, and because he heard us kind of venting about how we were struggling, and it was quite a few people in my class, and he said, hey, remember that you got through undergrad probably because you're independent, probably because you're self-motivated, and you got through undergrad maybe not asking for help. But in graduate school, you're going to need to ask for help. It is different. These topics are big. It is different. You need to ask for help when you need it. You need to talk to your professors. You need to be comfortable talking to your classmates. That was definitely an adjustment I had to make, was asking for help. And him saying that was definitely something I needed to hear, and I'm sure my classmates needed to hear. So I did reach out to him after I got that assignment, and I did tell him, hey, I did really poorly on this. This is what's going on in the background of my life. And honestly, I know that who I am is not being reflected in my work. And he, of course, was like, hey, I understand. Let's talk about it. And he kind of outlined exactly what I needed to do. He gave me some examples of the assignment that would have been better suited for the assignment. And he just helped me. He helped me understand the topic. He helped me understand the assignment better. And that's really all I took. That's all I needed. Sometimes you just have to ask for help. You're not going to get through grad school not asking for help. So getting comfortable doing that is definitely something you will need to do, and something I had to do. And also not just from my professor, but from my friends, from my partner. You know, like my partner has helped me so much in just doing grocery runs for me. Just being the support I need, coming over and helping me clean my apartment. Like, she's amazing. So asking for help from the people in your life, asking for help from fellow students about like how they understood a topic, or do we have an assignment due this day? These little things can make a big difference. So that's definitely an adjustment I'm currently trying to make, is being better at asking for help, which I am a hyper independent person. So not my favorite, but I'm going to do it because it's what I need to do. There are truly days that are just wake up, eat, go to work, study, go to sleep. And if you're not asking for help during those times when you're going through that cycle, it can be really hard to break. I did have to also take a step back from that cycle and remember, hey, in order to do well in these parts of my life, I really have to take some time and care for myself. So that's another thing outside of asking for help that I had to adjust for my mental health. For me, that looks like just taking a full day off here and there to do nothing, or taking a full day off to go out and thrift and do something that brings me joy, so that way I can be motivated to get through the rest of the week. Or making plans with your friends for the future, so that way you have something to look forward to as you're grinding away throughout the semester. That's another little tool that I definitely would use throughout the semester to kind of help keep my mental health up, keep my spirits up, and just get through it, because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And then even now, I'm about to come up on the end of the semester. We're going to start finals soon and all that good stuff. I only get 2 weeks off, and then I start back in the summer. So I already planned I'm taking some time off when I have my break from school, from work, so I can really regroup. I can do some spring cleaning. I can do some self-care. I can do all these things. And your self-care doesn't necessarily need to look like that, but it just needs to look like something. Prioritizing some self-care is also going to be what gets you through this. I do maybe want to do a little like self-care special episode at the end of the season. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. I feel like I kind of rambled during this episode because it was something I'm very passionate about. So if you have any questions or need any clarification on any of the things I talked about, please let me know. I'm always happy to answer questions, whether it's on one of the platforms you are getting information from me, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, blah, 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 if it's on there. Or you can always follow me on Instagram at Woah, and I'm more than happy to accept a DM and let you know what something looked like for me, or give you some resources if I'm able to. I do, on my Linktree and my Instagram, have so many resources for finding a therapist through Psych Today, through all these other platforms that are basically therapist directories. Even if that's the only thing you take from this video, go to therapy, guys. Like, it's so helpful. It's so important if you're going to become a therapist. And yeah, I have so many resources in my Instagram Linktree, and I hope some people take advantage of them and take advantage of me. Like, please reach out to me. I'd love to chat. I'd love to yap. I'd love to build a community here on Woah, and that's really the point of this. So I hope you enjoyed what I talked about. I hope it made sense, and I will catch you next time, guys.